Good afternoon. I'm going to make a quick announcement that most of you have probably heard, but we will, starting next Thursday, the 28th, we will not have class until the 10th of October. Venerable will be on retreat during that time. So we'll ask and invite you to come in and read and to practice the practices. Okay.
Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. So as we're preparing to start our meditation class, I'd like to make create a bridge from language prajna to contemplative illumination. If we don't make that bridge, it's impossible for us to move from where we are, what we call our home. There's in the 37 practices of a bodhisattva, step number 2 speaks of how one leaves his homeland. Homeland doesn't mean necessarily leaving your house, leaving your family, or whatever, but it's the world that we live in and the way that we hold understandings, and the way that we walk through the world is our homeland. And so we are making a journey. And to do it successfully, we have to put feet to it. I can't just think about moving to another place. I have to actually go there to be there. And so meditation necessarily involves movement, and not just movement of the mind. So I'd like to kind of delve into that a little bit before we get started with our first practices. So this process of dhyana, or initially involves thinking out a truth. The first step with applied and sustained thought, right? So that's thinking out of truth. But then after you think out of truth, you have to also think in a truth. So it's thinking out of truth, applying and sustaining thought until that thing becomes an idea that has some movement in you. And then it becomes bigger than an idea. It becomes sweet to you. You know, it's very difficult to do something that your heart's not in. You're just going through the motions. I don't care what it is, whether it's on your job, whether it's in your love life, whether it's in your spiritual life, just going through the motions, doing the things, showing up Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, or you know, and it seems like when we get into a routine of something, that becomes even more mundane. So we get captured by habit, and habit has a habit has a kind of quality of its own. So it's like, I know I should do this. I do this at 9 o'clock every morning. I don't even need a clock to wake me up. I know I have to be up. The whole body gets into a certain posture, and it just knows what it has to do. That's part of the marvelousness of the human body, though, I must say, you know, because I don't have to learn how to drive all over again every time I go out to the car. You know, it's coded in me. And so sometimes we can get into the habit of going through the motions with meditation, and we think we're meditating. You know, but we're not really meditating. We're just doing what we do. We go through motions, and whether it's 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, I got my meditation in for the day. But it's a little bit more than that. And you get out of it what you put in. If you don't put anything into it, you don't get much out of it. Or you think you do until the time that you really have to use some of it, and you find it's not there for you. So there's this idea of thinking a truth out until it becomes your truth, right? That's thinking the truth in, and it becomes a part of who you are. It becomes a part of how you think. It becomes a part of how you see and understand the world. Even when you miss the mark, you don't think you made it. You know when you missed it, you know. And the more you do it, the more you can see what you miss. That's very helpful because it helps to keep us engaged in developing, engaged in growing. It helps us to be more kindly towards other people's mess-ups because we can clearly see our own. It helps us to be, I won't even say more forgiving, because it's more like there becomes nothing to forgive. You know, that's why we don't really talk that much about forgiveness. We talk about cultivating something that eliminates the need for forgiveness. Forgiveness is after the fact. But what we're cultivating is a kind of mind that engages, that won't require the repentance. You know? So repenting feels wonderful because it gives you a cleansing, you know, a relief, because carrying offense is a heavy weight. It's a bondage, and it's a baggage, you know. And so being able to lift that off of oneself, you know, it feels so good. But what if it was never on you? And I don't mean like a sociopath who doesn't feel anything, but one knows within themselves that what is in their heart and mind, they're able to walk out. That's a little bit different. So it moves to a space of where one begins to delight oneself in these principles. you find delight in them. Even when you can't live them, you find delight in them. That encourages you to stay on the path, or if you got off, to get back on the path. You know, it's this kind of delight. There's a Christian song that I used to sing all the time. Order my steps in your word, O Lord. Lead me and guide me every day. Send your deliverance, I think it was, or something like that. Lord, I pray, please order my steps in your word. Now, it didn't say order my steps in you, O Lord. It says order my steps in your word. So there's something about principles that are so important that when they resonate with us in a certain way, they point us to our original nature. That's what that resonance is. Otherwise, you just wouldn't be able to grok with it. You wouldn't, there would be no way that when you enter into it, it brings a certain kind of aspiration and a certain kind of energy and a certain kind of aliveness that lifts one in the inward parts. And I'm trying to stay away from words that imply emotion, because I think emotion is sort of like energy moving, you know, and it's all over you. But I'm not afraid of using the word devotion, because I'm being devoted to a principle. Now, wherever I see that principle in display, then it sort of allows me to ascribe reverence or worthiness to that quality, whoever it shows up in. Something like that. And when it is really in them, there is a quickening that can occur, because that one is like a mirror that shows you at your most fundamental aspect of self. And you get that ding. It's kind of like what a transmission is. This is a crude way of speaking about it. But you get that ding, that something resonates with you, and you know that that capacity is also in me. You know, we say things like, oh, I wish I had your this, or I wish I could be like you, or I wish I had your that. But the thing is, what you're actually experiencing is the recognition, because if you recognize it, you recognize it. The recognition that that quality, somewhere under a lot of stuff, is in you. So you're recognizing, seeing your own face. So this working the truth out in one's mind, because it has to be your own understanding. It has to be your own way. In the beginning, we might Paul parrot, because that's how children learn to speak. They listen, you know, and they hear things, they mimic things, and they say things. But after a while, they get to the place where it's their own understanding that begins to come forth. And sometimes their understanding can be erroneous or misplaced. And as parents, we don't like the understanding that they have. And we try to correct that. We try to give them a different understanding about something. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. But there is some place, a transference takes place between the hearing and between the witnessing, one's own wisdom, however feeble that might be, however scattered, however misplaced, it begins to arise. And then one knows what he knows, even though he may not know all there is to know, or may not know the best way to look at something or understanding, but it is his understanding. So part of the purpose of meditation is to think out the truth, and then that which we choose to embrace, bringing it into us until it is a part of us. So meditation, you could say, is does something for us. It delights us. It gives us a certain kind of joy, a certain kind of ease, a certain kind of here's where I would use the word acceptance, but the word has been so misunderstood that I'm trying to stay away from conventional words that we're using every day to try to give us a little expanded vocabulary that could be a little bit more, a little bit closer to the actual experience. And the best way I can say it is it gives us a sense of inner delight. When the Buddha was meditating, he started entering into these states, and he said in the beginning he backed off of them, because I think he's a very pragmatic man. He's, he a ruler's son. He learned all of the politics, all the ways of the world, all about running in a country or a nation or whatever it was. He learned all of these things. So he wasn't like a cream puff, and he wasn't. They say that he excelled in his what do you call it? Like when you prepare for war and you learn to use all the weapons, and I'm getting away from all of these words now. They don't even come up in my vocabulary much anymore. And I was such a fighter. Boy, oh boy. But he excelled in the warring arts. And but now his mind was not inclined towards that fight at all. Not at all. That he had begun to delight in obey, and that's the fruit of the meditation. It's just that he said, like, this can't be the end of it. Like, yeah, I might be feeling really good, frou here, but there's got to be a bigger purpose for it than that, than just feeling good. So he says, I think there must be more. His meditation teacher assured him, there is nothing else. There's no higher than this. And so he landed. And I'm sure he had the best in the land, right? But he left and he sought out another teacher. That teacher did, in fact, take him deeper into his examination of truth and in himself. And then he said, now you know everything that I know. Come, let us teach together. He said, no, I still think there must be more. And that second teacher says, no, there's no more. This is the highest that one can attain. And then he left and went out on his own. But it wasn't until he reached a place of depth that within his knowing that he was close to something, but he had not attained it, because there was still some aspect not satisfied, not relieved, not free. And he said, I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to move until I awake. So if I die sitting here, that's what I'll do. And, we know the end of the story. Skip to the back of the book. But in this process of this ease that arises, it starts with something that we do on the outside to set the stage, but it does not bring the ease. It only sets the stage for the ease. But when one starts to work out this truth in one's own mind and in one's own being, then that truth, it does two things. It starts to work itself out in your life, and it sets you on a path of spiritual prospering. And that is the prelude to good fortune, and good fortune is more than money. It's all the ways that we find favor and opportunity in life, and of course, wisdom opens the door to prajna. So meditation is not prajna, but it posits us at the doorway of prajna. So meditation, we need to know why we are meditating. We don't have to go to the top of the whys. We need to find out what takes us to the next step. And then when we get there, what takes us to the next step. And when we get there, what takes us to the next step. So we know that meditation lends us temporarily a kind of joy and tranquility, kind of peacefulness, you could say. But it does other things for us too. It protects us from the fate of wrongdoing. That's real important, because I speak of the fate of wrongdoing, not just wrongdoing, but the fate of wrongdoing. The action that comes about as a result of our wrongdoing. It saves us from that. So in that sense, we are our own savior. It's a good enough reason for me to engage in meditation. And I'll tell you how it saves us from the fate of wrongdoing as I go on today. But it also makes us fruitful and strong in our endeavors, and in our relationships. So we have our inner feeling of contentment. We have strength in our relationships, happiness in our relationships. We have the fruitfulness of our endeavors. It protects us from the fate of wrongdoing. Now, these sound like important things, and yet we have this idea of meditation being all about posture and sitting, like focusing on really the wrong things. It's like, we used to have a saying in sales, I can't even, this is really good. I know, truly, because I used to constantly have to deal with my mind, because I had all these old things that crop up all the time. Something sales and benefits tell. I can't even remember it. We have all these little catchy phrases. You get those in, and then you pump yourself up when you're in the sales office, and there's customers out there, right? And you're in the back, and they pump you up with all these pithy sayings, so that when you go get them now, go get them, Tiger, and facts tell and benefits sell. Yeah, that's it. Facts tell and benefits sell. So today I'm selling you on benefits, not facts. And I'm telling you because you can give somebody else's facts, right? But your benefits are what you experience yourself. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit different than somebody's facts. uh, a lot of times I use, just because of my journey, I'm always saying that whatever you've learned that's good, you should keep that and add to it. And so a lot of times I look in the Christian scriptures and I see how I hold something now compared to how I used to hold something. In other words, I take that, and with the mind I am cultivating now, I see, because we have a lot of things in us that we don't know is in us. Some ways that we see and understand and remember and all of that. It's down there lurking in the depths, but it affects how we act today. And sometimes we can be learning something today and we say, well, I really embrace this now, but when push comes to shove and there's an action and there's a reaction and response, we're not digging into our files, to see how we look at this. It's like right there. It just comes up for us and we act in that way, and that's why we have so much remorse when we start to really understand something, because it's like the good I would do, I don't do. What I don't want to do, I do. And that's a different kind of pain. Now, when you're doing something that you want to do, whether it's good or bad, you're like copacetic with yourself. It's when you're in that war with yourself, the good that I would do, I can't do it at this moment. And what I didn't want to do, I did that very thing. That becomes troubling to us. But that's one way that you know that you're in the process of the shift and process of the change. And that's why you have to allow space for yourself, to cross. You are leaving home and you're crossing that bridge. And when these, they call them diver temptations come upon you, you understand what that is, that there is a shift going on. And one day, right in that moment, you can apply that which you hold to be true today, and that's how you uproot a habitual tendency, an old thought, the way a memory makes you feel. And so it doesn't even mean that you don't have the feeling. And it could be a very unpleasant feeling. But you can kind of separate it from yourself. You could put some space between it that allows you to be there with that feeling and know that it's just a feeling. And if I can hold it, I used to have, I'm so old now, I don't anymore, but I used to have hot flashes, and I had them for a long time. And I suffered when I had them. And I would be upset with I would just be upset with the medical establishment, because I didn't feel like they were working hard enough to work on that problem, because as I understood it, men didn't have hot flashes. So that's not a science to really get into, because that doesn't bother us that much. And so I would be upset. It's all these little things that you have that you hold in deep down inside, that you don't even know is there. And then I said, well, instead of me being mad and like railing on the male establishment and all of that like I always do, I said, why don't I why don't I come up with a solution for myself? And so I did. What I did was I started timing them. And I realized they last 3 minutes. They're about 3 minutes. Then I said, oh, I can handle 3 minutes. And so what happened was the next time I had a flash, I said 3 minutes. I checked my time, 2 minutes. Checked my time, I got about 1 more minute to go. And then it was over. And that's it. And that's how I broke my aversion to them. I understand that there is something, there's a scientific reason there's something happening in the body, yeah, but I found that I could tolerate 3 minutes of discomfort. It was not the end of the world. But before, as soon as I had them, it was like I was on fire. And you better not say anything to me during that time. You know, I'm not reliable at this moment. You know, but I found that I could hold it. And sometimes it can be as simple as trying to hold our peace for 3 minutes instead of having to immediately handle a situation. And this is a big one for me. You have to know what your own thing is. You know, what trips you up. And for me, it was anger. Flash, I have a flash. You know, been working on it all my life. Yeah. You know, and I mean, it's over in 3 minutes, but who knows? Sometimes I burn the house down by then. You know, so it takes a lot to rebuild it. You know, do I even have the resources to rebuild it? You know, does the other person want it rebuilt at this point? It was like, you know what? No, I'm okay. You know, and so this idea that meditation protects us from the fate of wrongdoing, it's enough to inspire us to want to get it. Forget about if I make you suffer. In the beginning, it just keeps me from suffering. That would be something. You know, so sometimes we go into something for a purely selfish reason, but as we start to walk through it, we see its benefits, not only for self, but for others, because we come closer and closer to our true nature. So it's more than just posture and breathing. It is definitely about techniques that work or methods that work, but it's more than just about methods. Now I'm trying to bring us home to where we live as human beings now. Mm-hmm. So I was looking in the Bible, and one of my favorite books is Proverbs, which is the wisdom book of the Bible, and the other is Psalms, which is the devotional, the songs. And there was one scripture in there that said, "Why do the nations rage?" And some Bibles say, "Why does the heathen rage? And the people plot in vain." Now that's in Psalm 2:1. But in Psalm 1:2, the word plot was translated as meditate. Why do the people meditate in vain? And so I started thinking about this, and it became so clear to me that we all meditate in one way or another, you know, all the time. If not on wholesome principles, then on unwholesome ones, you know, but we're always meditating on something. So we have to know that the purpose of entering into this is so that there comes a shift in the mind, what resides in the mind. And the mind is the precursor or the forerunner of all actions. You don't intentionally commit any action that doesn't have a precursing thought in the mind, however quick. So if we're not going to meditate on wholesome principles, then there are unwholesome principles that we meditate on. Think about. You ever have something happen and you run that scenario over and over in your mind? You say like, yeah, and when she said this, I should have said that. You know, but I didn't think of it at the moment. Or it just keeps coming back to your mind. And it felt a little uncomfortable when it came back to your mind, this incident. And but then about the third or fourth time it came back to your mind, it was a little bit stronger than the first time it came back to your mind, because now you dig in the trench. And by the next time you see him, you're like, you're like deranged, because you have built up a story in your mind that now becomes your what? Starts with a T. It becomes your truth. I was watching some Alfred Hitchcock series from 1956 the other day, and the black and white. And what I noticed was that every little episode really showed how we almost create a self-fulfilling prophecy with our thoughts, how we create something out here. And because in every story, someone got it in their mind that somebody was thinking a particular thing, or somebody was doing a particular thing, until they were so convinced. I mean, you could not convince them that that person wasn't thinking that, or that person wasn't doing that. And then they acted on how they thought the person was thinking, or what they thought the person was doing, and it just ended up making a mess out of everything. Every single episode was like that. And I tell you, it was dharmic, because I could see cause and condition, and I could see in the Dhammapada, it talks about how mind is the originator, the creator of all things, and what a person thinks and ponders on becomes the inclination of their mind. So at this time of meditation practice, we are determining what we're going to think and ponder on, and what the inclination of our mind is going to be. So in that book of Psalms, it said, and this sounds very familiar, whatever really shapes a man's thinking shapes his life. Whatever shapes a man's thinking shapes his life. And it's like a guarantee that it will be impossible for you to not have an outcome different than what you constantly meditate upon. So if there's something in your life that you don't like, then you find the principle of truth that can uproot, dissolve, bring comfort to that. And that's how you use it in real life, for it to make an impact on your life. It's not like, I'll just take that, and that might not even be your issue, your problem. That's not what's confronting you. It's not in your life right now. And it's okay to learn other things, but it's about every single day finding that which thwarts you in life, and finding the principle of truth by which to uproot it. Now, when we talk about meditating, we think of a time that we set aside for a few minutes, or half an hour, or an hour, to really focus. And that's good, but that's not it. It said that we should recognize that we are always meditating. We're always, the mind is always engaged in some view. That's what the mind does. I mean, we don't want it to stop engaging in some view. We just want it to engage in a beneficial way, in a like what we call a right view that's useful, that's beneficial, that's helpful, that's all of that. That has the seed, the essence of goodness in it. And then when that has come to its place of perfection, there's nothing else to do, and everything falls away. And that's how one enters into no thought, non-thought. It is the conclusion of wholesome thought. So we just can't like pick up a technique and go into no thought, because it comes on the heels of wholesome thought. And it's not just something that we do, it becomes like a way of life. It becomes almost like you know how you used to have the old pictures of a person and there was an angel on one shoulder and there was a devil on the other shoulder, and is the TV on in there for him so that he can watch? Okay, sorry. And like one would say, "Do it," and the other one would say, "Do it," and then and usually in those kinds of things they knock the angel off the shoulder, and they follow Mara or the devilish thought or whatever. And then when they did it and they got the consequences, they would say, "The devil made me do it," something like that. But the devil is in our thoughts, is what I'm saying. And so it's not just at that moment that we set aside, but we do set aside some time for this. But it is to become aware in every moment of what kind of thought is arising in your mind. I've seen some who we call truly spiritual people, and they're walking around like totally oblivious to everything. And it's not that you are oblivious to everything. In fact, you're not oblivious to anything. So getting into that half-mindedness around no self or non-self, you see, it's one maybe can fill their cup up with this sense of no self, and then begin to look for intently upon and see the emptiness of all phenomena. But it's best if they come up together. The understanding comes up together, because then you keep the right balance and you don't end up flighty and obtuse and like out of your mind. Sometimes you can be elevated and lifted in some of these states that you are catapulted someplace else. And when that happens, for me, I ask myself, is this useful? And if it's not, I bring myself down a notch so that that other view of marvelous existence can balance it out. So you see some people too developed in one area and they have this only half understanding of emptiness. And they're just like basically of no use, no good, living off their girlfriend or their spouse or their mother, because they can't do anything, not inclined to take care of themselves, even wash their own clothes. They're just like bums, and they think they're so spiritual. And some people think they're spiritual too. So they take care of them. But it's a false kind of emptiness. And I want to talk these things out because once we get on this elevator, this one of these high-tech elevators. I mean, you've been on the clunky ones and they rattling, hitting the sides of the wall as they go up to the next floor. And it's like, will we ever get to floor number 2? But I remember when I went to visit some of my students in Chicago, and they lived on the 88th floor. I said, oh my God, it'll be tomorrow before we get to their apartment. That thing went so fast, and the door opened. It was unbelievable. And actually, I think we had to take 2 elevators. We took one to the 40th floor, then got in another, and took us up to the 88th floor. And it was like that. So we're about to catch fast car. Sorry, we got a fast car, but we don't want a ticket to just anywhere, and that's why we have to have our directions, and we have to be sure in our aim, in our goal. Otherwise, the universe is a big, 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 big place, and we can get lost out there. The mind is without limits, and we can get lost in there. This is a very serious, serious thing. And so we pick a place and a time that we do our meditation practice. But not only that, we develop a certain kind of lifestyle. And whether you do good with that or not so good, sometimes you still know. Like sometimes I know that I watch a little bit too much TV, and I could be watching it for the noblest of purposes, you know? But still, that's time I could have invested. And I'd say, like, after this episode, that streaming thing is a scourge. You know, it was okay once a week, but when you can watch it, all the episodes like nonstop, I mean, it's a scourge for some of us. We have to apply more self-control. So what I've learned to do is, or I'm learning to do, is do my practice, and then I know I can get it in. Because if I start to binge watching, when it's time to cut that off and to do something else, it's like I'm just gonna watch one more episode. Just gonna watch 2 more. I'm looking at the clock. It's 2 o'clock now. Okay, 5 o'clock. I'm gonna stop. And then I can give myself all the reasons why this was educational, informative, useful, you know, because it is those things. But it's whether I'm after the scattered wisdom or the sublime wisdom. And in my unenlightened state, I'll incline towards the scattered wisdom. Yeah. We like to learn things. That's why we like imparting. Maybe you only understand 1% of it, but boy, do we like it. Because we have this kind of mind. But we will never have that kind of mind without doing what it takes to cultivate and develop that kind of mind. So we start by preparing ourselves and making a commitment and setting up a place that we're going to do. You don't have to set up a place, but it's usually useful to set a particular place. And it doesn't have to be a dedicated space. Sometimes people want me to come and see their meditation room and all of me. I'm like, but how much time do you actually spend in there? So it's nice when we have this idea that we're going to set up a place, and we should have that idea. But we have to keep checking ourselves to make sure that we're following through on the idea. Usually after we set it up and it's looking all nice and lovely, like we go every day and like look at our handiwork and wow, that's a nice meditation room. That's a nice looking altar right there. And go and you bow to the altar and head on out. And so there's something else that has to be done in the process. So we start with contemplating the principles that we gather from language prajna. And there are other things that we do. We, ask ourselves each time we go to sit, how well did I do with these today? Or how well did I do with these yesterday if we start in the morning? And now we're comparing intention, things that we like in our minds, with what we are actually walking out. And this is where it really starts to get interesting, because it's a little bit different than thinking. Because your mind will tell you the truth. It may not tell other people the truth, but it will tell you the truth. Like, you did this and you said that and you thought the other. Because the more we want to know our minds, the more the mind will open up and let you see. Yeah. The less you want to know the mind said, no problem. It just close the door and you become oblivious. But if you really want to know how you're measuring up to what you hold in your, I'll say in your head and your heart, and you know what I mean, to be true, then this reflection time is critical. It's crucial. And it's not for name and blame, but it's to check up and see how you're doing. And you can kind of take this up as a, as a parent, as a employee, as a in all aspects of our lives. When we really take up something, we see it like a duty, like a duty, something that there's some kind of inner respect that's tied into it, or inner honor, um, something that we give ourselves to. This is my offering. It could be a big thing, it could be a small thing, big and small, big and small. So don't just look at the big things. Looking at the big things is like I'm gonna tell you, everybody is a reincarnation of somebody, okay? So, but when people talk about who they're a reincarnation of, it always has to be like Cleopatra, Caesar, it's got to be somebody big and somebody great, but it doesn't. Every little thing, it's the small foxes that destroy the vine. So we don't have to be looking for greatness, but just recognizing what truly is arising in oneself, and where that fits on your scale of how you want to know yourself. So this sounds a little bit selfish, and in a way it is, because that's where we start. We only know other people to the extent that we know ourselves. So when we're doing these practices like self and others are equal, there's something that comes before that. And that is, I can only know you to the extent that I know me. And when I know me, this kind of clarity breaks down the fog, whether it's my fog or whether it's your fog. once I come clear at seeing myself, the fog is lifted, and what remains are the sharpened faculties that come from not grasping, not imputing on according to what I've seen, heard, tasted, touched, smelled, or thought. All of that gets dispersed. And suddenly you can just see something clearly. Now, where did that come from? Did it come from someplace out here? No. It manifested from one's own brightness. So these words, we have to know what they mean. And the only way we know what they mean is through the experiences that we have, what brightness means, what the light means. Now, they're just words that people are using to try to describe something that, maybe can't be described in words, but can be experienced. So when I read something, I'll say in imparting that I don't know what that means, I'll say I don't know what that means right now, but I know it can be experienced. Then I will know what it means. And I just kind of leave it like that. And I might read it over, that passage, that sentence, that half a sentence, those 4 words, that one word. And I'm like really asking myself, what does this mean? How can I understand this passage? And asking that question as opposed to giving an answer, oh, well, I think this means so and so. I'm suspending the answer. I'm just posing the question. And at some point, expect an encounter with Prajna so that the answer becomes plain as the nose on my face. How could I have missed that? How could I have not seen that? When you've been pondering about something and you can't come up with a solution or a reason why something, and then one day you just do. You just know. You can see it so clearly. Like, oh, how did I miss that? And so in this particular teaching, it said that those who attempt they use the word prayerless meditation. And I'm thinking of another word that we could use, but one where one hasn't entered with one's whole heart to give it its dedicated time, its dedicated space in your life. It said that they wrestled unarmed. So there is some equipment that we have. It's like we want to go deep sea diving, we can go, but we can only go so far with the snorkeling stuff. You got to get the real scuba gear if you want to go deeper. And you got to know how to use the equipment, or the equipment will kill you. So we shouldn't think that things are without things designed to support and develop us aren't without their own power. And misused, they can hurt us. Without the proper training of how to use them, a good thing becomes something that's not good for us at all. So if we think about misuse, it could mean that's not having respect for them. I have a gas stove at home, and we had a gas stove at home, and gas stove and electric stoves are very different. And somebody who can cook on a gas one makes mistakes when they try to cook on an electric one. Usually burn up everything, including the pan, sticking to the electric stove. But one who has an electric stove could just blow up the place if they're not used to working with a gas stove. And so when you take up your gear, when you take up your equipment, even spiritual equipment, you need to know what it's for. You need to know how to use it. You need to know when to use it. You need to know when not to use it. For instance, if you came in and you had left not the pilot, but the knob on the gas just a little bit, so the flame is not there, but the gas has been seeping out, then that's not the time to decide I'm going to cook dinner now. You need to like air out the place a little bit before you light that fire, because gas throughout the house, and if they hadn't put a scent in it, you wouldn't even know it. You would not even know it. You either get blown up or you lay down to take a nap and you die from carbon monoxide poisoning. You know, that's why they put a scent. It's not, the gas is odorless. They put a scent in it so you'll know if it's been leaking in your house. And so spiritual things demand this kind of respect. Mm. So to think out truth requires searching, it requires examining, it requires observing and understanding. Searching out, examining, observing, and understanding. And that's how the delight arises. The understanding brings delight. Not because you told me something, but because I searched something out for myself. Only I know what's in my own mind. And sometimes I don't even know that until something gets triggered. You know? So this is a deep inquiry and investigation, not into the Dharma forever settled throughout the universe, but a deep investigation into myself. Mm-hmm. And they called it in the study I was doing in Psalms a delight. A delight. His delight is in the law. Seeing the beauty of it, the adornment of it, that makes one have a taste for it and desire it, knowing its benefits, as opposed to seeing it as an unalterable rule, knowing its intention to bring one to the fullness of their aspiration, the highest level of humanity, because that's the transfer point where one changes lineage into the realm of the Buddhas. Mm. And so I wanted to share a couple of things that Buddha Master said in this regard. Yeah, that was sort of my own examination or idea of meditation that matters, so that it doesn't become just something that we do, and so that we can say we got our meditation in, or so that we can think we got our meditation in. But to really have these life-changing experiences, it becomes that personal to you. So the Buddha talked about there are so many Dharma methods to practice, to observe. There's contemplation, to contemplate or to visualize. You practice, you observe, you contemplate, and you visualize. It says Hinayana has its observation practices, such as samatha and vipassana, and breath counting. Its wonderful effects are realized by directing one's effort towards one's own thought and breath. As one's thought and breath merge into oneness, one clearly observes one's inhalations and exhalations, and through stabilization, one obtains observation. Now, he says we call observation today insight. Observation then strengthens one's stabilization, and thoughts end then right there at the nostril. So there is something in the process, and we can just experience a little bit of it almost instantly, like we could do that right now. So why don't we do that to get a little inkling of what he's speaking of from this particular method? And skipping all the preliminary, which would help us better refine this experiment. But if we just started with that little part, that doesn't mean that's where you start. He was just giving a for example, and he started right there. So there are preliminaries that will make that experience so much more beneficial, useful, but if we just started right there and just slowly taking an inhalation, breathing in through the nose, feeling where the air from the outside enters the nostril. And when you feel that and you know that location, just keeping the mind right there, that becomes your object. Keeping the mind right there means not bringing and riding with the breath when it enters the nostrils and goes down into the chest and all of that. And just right there where you feel it from outside air to inside the nostril. You don't have to do anything special with the breath. No need to make it a long breath or short breath. But with observation, you'll know this was a long inhalation compared to the last one. Or this is a short inhalation compared to the last one. And you could observe all kinds of things in this observation. Is the in-breath cooler or warmer than the exhalation? Or is the exhalation cooler or warmer than the inhalation? Is the inhalation longer than the exhalation? Are they equal? Is the breath smooth or is it coarse? Is it choppy? Is it soft? Do you notice other faculties present as your hearing become more acute or less? What about the feeling sensations? Are you more aware of sensations in your body or less? Even peering into the vastness of the emptiness behind the closed eyelids. Is it becoming lighter or darker? Does it seem as if there is a kind of seeing that doesn't end at the eyelids, but goes out into infinity? Do you feel a release in the mind? One is not so much like a cone here, so confined. There's a spaciousness there. So much so that when thinking upticks, it disturbs your tranquility. And so that's how quick you can begin to meditate. Now, that's something you could do it in a minute. You can drop right into that zone. Doesn't take all that preparation, doesn't take all of that. It can be something as simple as making the air coming from outside to inside, right at that tip. He said, like a sawyer saws a log. His eyes don't go to and fro, but he keeps his eye right there where the teeth of the saw or the blade meet the wood. And that's how this mindfulness of breathing should be. This is or like a gatekeeper. He doesn't care where you came from or where you go once you're in the city. He's only counting right here when you step into the city. That's it. He just keeps his eye right there. And this is a way of bringing one into a state of peacefulness. Now, the study and the practices that we do, it's not designed for this. This is a byproduct of the studies and the practice. So if this becomes your main goal, then you just stepped inside the door and built it, and just threw down your cot and built a house right there in the door jamb, because that's not the end of this. That's only the beginning. But he says what happens is one's focus doesn't move away from the nostrils if you are observing. So if you thought of the word as insight before, maybe we would take it to observation, which implies a certain presence, being present there with it, So we're not like letting go for a while, going into la la land, whatever, but we're actually becoming hyper vigilant, but in an experiential way, not so much a thinking way. So the questions that I posed today was a way to show you how you are remaining relevant in the process and not like going to sleep, and that's what overcomes what? Sloth and sloper. Sloth and toper. That's what overcomes sloth and toper. That when you sit down and meditate, I always go to sleep. Or if I sit down and listen to a Dharma talk, I always go to sleep. Because it's learning how to observe, and how observing has a slight difference than thinking. So maybe that could be the first place that some of us start to really recognize the distinction between observing and thinking. So let's not use the word insight right now. Okay, we're just going to think about observing, meaning being fully present with that. He says, in this way, one's thoughts are not scattered. As one follows the breath with clarity, the observance becomes very clear. And you can see how quickly it can catapult you into a state of what starts with an N. It's a hyphenated word. Non, I'm looking, all that's good, but I'm looking for another word. Non-differentiation. Non-differentiation. Because you notice that when you focused the mind on the object, your hearing also became more acute. Your seeing capacity deepens. Your sensory awareness, tactile, increases. So they've all, like before they were like this, but now by bringing one thing into alignment with concentration, it brings all of them. And you end up in this clear yet non-differentiating space. So if you haven't looked at it like that, go and try that. Try to do 20 meditations a day, 21-minute meditations. When you just have a minute you can take, just stop and bring your attention to the tip of the nostril where the air from the outside becomes air from the inside. The air inside leaves just that one spot, nothing else. Not struggling with the breath, but staying focused. And then you can increase it from, instead of 20 times with 1 minute, just do 10 times with 3 minutes. Or just do 1 time with 5 minutes, or whatever you can do. And then the mind will start to like, okay, got this, and it'll start to do something else. Notice that when that has arisen, maybe you won't notice it until it has arisen. But if you keep at this, you'll notice before the mind shifts and vectors off, you will feel it as if it's coming from a distance. And you may not be able to stop it, but you see I'm getting like distracted. How are you getting distracted? It's not, you can feel it arising, and you'll feel like distraction is coming, and then it lands, and it's like, oh, I got kicked out. After a while, you'll realize that the mind didn't get distracted, but a certain kind of boredom arose with this, because we need things. We need some excitement in our life, so we like stuff popping off in our life. We're all drama queens and kings. We like, this is the spice of life. you know? Um, and and so a little bit of boredom comes in because we're just not accomplished enough to like the non-drama. Some of us like non-drama, but it's very, very boring. It's very boring. It's not like having a sense of the marvelousness and the wonder of life, of things, the interest, the curiosity. No, we get tired when we get like sort of like stable, what we call even tempered. You know, it can get pretty boring. But this way keeps that boredom from arising. So what you'll notice is before you felt that you were distracted, you could see it coming at a distance. It's getting ready to get me, get me, get me, get. I'm gone. But after a while, you see that there was really like this little bit of boredom first. And so the mind went off looking for something. The mind's like, hey, what's my job? What am I doing here? You know, the mind went off to look for something else. So we didn't really get distracted. The boredom, there was boredom, and the mind went off looking for something. So then the mind hears, woof, woof, ah, and then follows the sound or whatever the distraction might be. It allows a thought to arise. And so the more we get used to being able, and it's a good preliminary practice, you know, it's correct jhana with applied and sustained thought. One enters and abides in the first jhana. Okay, so applied thought, that means what we did, where we went with it to the tip of the nostril, anapanasati. And if you want, and there's 16 steps of this, that's just step number one. Okay, so if we ever do a retreat on that, it's a lot more to it. Okay, so that's one. But now it says, and it tells you what the first jhana, you know, what the fruit of the first jhana is. And a lot of times people think they're in it because they've managed to sit in it for 15 minutes or even 30 minutes. But what happens is that the breath gets finer and finer. And here's where the dangerous part gets. When the breath gets finer and finer, it becomes more and more difficult to hold, right? Because it's like, where'd the breath go? You know, or no. And so what one has to do then is get even more still. There's a stillness that can emerge. And this takes practice and it takes development. But once you experience it, it's like once you get the directions and actually go to the store, you know how to get there. But you have to trod that path, beat feet to the store to know really where it is. Otherwise, you're just looking at the map. But once you have, you know where that is. You know when you get there. And that ability to stabilize ourselves is the first step. And once you do that, you don't have to go through a whole rigmarole because you know where it is. And because it's not over there or over there, you can instantaneously get there if you have the right method. And if you have patiently taken yourself through every step of observation, remain knowing when your energy is sinking, knowing how to like lift your energy. If your energy is starting to get too woo-woo, how to bring it down. All of these things you're learning in that. And you need to give yourself the time to really get it right. If you don't, then everything beyond this is a flight of fancy. So he says, and this way, observation and what it is becomes very clear. One's thoughts, I'm going to end in a couple of minutes. One's thoughts are not scattered. One does not enter a muddled, drowsy state. Observation and stabilization are in balance. And this is correct, Jana. If stabilization is without observation, important. If stabilization is without observation, or if in the midst of observation there's no stabilization, then this is a meditational defect. And then he said, I will not say more about that at this time. So he leaves that. That's get all the way up in my notes at like page 289. I'm just saying, because he's setting in some requirements for this to be able to happen. I mean, I felt like the whole atmosphere in here was pregnant with a kind of stillness. Could you feel it? Yeah, exactly. And it became a kind of non-differentiating in peaceful energy. And that's one reason why I don't like to go to meditations with a lot of other people, and they like all over the place in their head and all that, because then I not only have to do my work for me, then I have to work on their stuff. I got, all of that. So I prefer solitary for that, that reason, because the more sensitive you become on these subtle levels, actually it'll become difficult for you to spend a lot of time with people, because there is a kind of unification of mind. And I won't say it's exactly like accessing, like accessing everybody's thoughts. So nobody has to be afraid, somebody, when they get to a certain, like they reading your thoughts and they know everything. It's not like that. It's not like that. But it is a kind of interference, like in the old ways we would tune to a radio station, and you get off just a little bit and you start hearing static. So it's more like static. But when we're really doing our individual practice and we come together with that same mind, then it's extremely powerful. Before that, it's a distraction. So he says the term body, can I have 3 minutes? It's 1:32. The term body refers to the physical body, including all movements of the body. Within perfect one-pointed jhana that is devoid of distraction, one must chant the mantra, if we're using mantra jhana, which can propel or evoke a response from the three continents of the universe. So that means bringing realms and removing the thin divide, perceptual divide between different realms, removing the perceptual divide between different realms. This mantra is like what removes the divides. Understand what they do. They're like a key. Actually, it's like a mind seal that protects and shields the mind from that static, like tuning right to that perfect frequency on the radio dial, like that. And only then can one immediately receive empowerment, because that mantra, when we are aligned and focused in that way, it moves the mind seal, the three mysteries of the Buddha or the Bodhisattva. So there becomes a convergence of a mind stream that one aligns with the mind stream of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So we have to know that the instruments of that method and what they do. And when we have an understanding about what they do, then we can handle them. We can use them, and they will generate a kind of boundless light, because the thin divide is removed. And the more we get into the worlds of light, for lack of a better word, it gives us entrance into more of what's here. And that's how one sees something, or one knows something. With their faculty becomes tuned to a certain frequency, is a bad word. It becomes tuned to a certain frequency or certain vibration or certain wave. You can say wave, but we don't have any words. Those are all words that we use on this side, but every world has its own characteristics and qualities, but we access more than the characteristics, the mere characteristics and qualities of our ordinary world. So it's not anything woo-woo or supernatural. It's all natural. It's all natural, operating in its realm, or with your capacity to be in the realm and recognize its characteristics and its qualities. But it starts with non-differentiation, and that starts with concentration on an object. So we're going to chop up these different aspects of the whole meditation process bit by bit. But I would like to ask you to do lots of 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute. Don't go long times until you're distracted. Don't go, oh, I know how to do this. I've been doing this for 20 years. But take it up with a new found sense of its purpose and respect for going further, not for reaching a point, but for cutting through our perceptual obstacles. I'm going to stop here, because if I go into the next, which goes into hand mudras and goes into mantras and goes into chanting, and when it should be a tender chant, and when it should be one that arouses strength, because different chants do different things. They're opening up different gates and channels and locks and all of that. That's how, one inherits a transformational body, and how one can, even when one falls into a state of disarray, how one can gather oneself, depending on how well you refine these processes. Of course, in the end, we all die. Doesn't mean we have to die with something. We can just cross our hands, our feet. That's how Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. That's how Abraham, Isaac, Jacob maybe not Abraham, but maybe Isaac or Jacob. I forget now. But that's why he said, Lord, he said, I don't want to die all sick and beat up, and that was his constant aspiration and his constant words to himself. I won't die that way. And he said, and when he died, his eyes were not abated. He was not, he was in his full right mind. And when he was ready to go, he called all his children together and he blessed each one of them and gave them what he wanted to give them. And he said he put his hands up behind his head and he left. I mean, that's the way, that's the way. I don't want to be driven. I want to leave at some point, but I don't want to be driven out. I want to just say, okay, see y'all, just go, But right now, because I'm not sure where I'm going to, I'll hang in for a while, But once I got that's done. No more need. I need this body right now. I need this body to use this time to try to perfect this mind. And that's all I'm needing for right now. Wow. Okay. Did somebody offer? Know the assignment, right? Okay. All right. Great. Will somebody offer up there today?
You hear me? Through this goodness, may awakenings spontaneously rise in our streams of being. May all obscurations and distortions fall away. May all beings be liberated from suffering and the stormy waves of birth, sickness, old age, and death.